The horizon isn't a horizon anymore. It's a roiling wall of ash and ember that blots out whatever remains of the sun. The sky has worn its new color for nearly a decade. A bruised, purplish-black haze that feels heavier each morning, settling into your lungs like grit. The air tastes of iron and forgotten prayers. Below, the ground has cracked open in ragged veins, like the skin of a dying animal desperate for one last drink. What was once a forest is now a petrified graveyard of skeletal trees, their branches reaching for a vanished sky. Rivers have retreated into oblivion. The Mississippi's great artery has shriveled into a chain of stagnant pools, each guarded by jagged boulders and the bones of those who died trying to follow its course. Farther inland, the Gulf Coast is unrecognizable, a wasteland of salt-crusted sandbars and half-sunken hulks of freighters that washed ashore when the last hurricane drowned every levee and spillway. Waves still crash, but they only stir grit and oil, nothing pure enough to drink. Every landmark has been desecrated. Watchtowers that once loomed over oil fields now lean like drunk sentinels, cables snapping in the wind. Highway overpasses have fallen, though fragments of yellow lines remain, faint guides to nowhere. The remnants of civilization cling in dusty storefronts, their windows boarded or shattered. The mannequins inside frozen in poses that mock the concept of life. No government answers anymore. The Capitol building stands hollow, its dome blackened by collapsed solar panels and makeshift fires. Mobile phone towers droop like exhausted giants. The last broadcast I caught on my radio crackled through their skeletons. There are no presidents left, only factions. Clans of scavengers who stake claims with rifles and rusted barbed wire. Some call themselves the wardens. They patrol the old roadways, collecting tolls in bullets or supplies. Others, the lanterns, cling to a flicker of hope, moving from village to village, handing out pamphlets on water purification and crop rotation. Neither group trusts outsiders. Survivor camps dot the landscape like scars. Each has its own rules. No one-size-fits-all blueprint for staying alive. Some are built in abandoned hotels, where the lobby has become a communal dining hall, and the roof gardens sprout ribbon weed that tastes like salty cardboard. Others burrow into subway tunnels, eking out a shivering existence under the earth, trading canned goods for batteries and stories. Every camp has someone who remembers before, an elder whose eyes have grown cloudy with the memory of blue skies and running water. Wildfires sweep through the plains in waves of hungry orange, devouring everything in their path. The wind carries embers like angry spirits, and by the time they land, they can ignite a whole hillside. You learn to flee before the smoke even reaches your nostrils, but sometimes you don't see it coming. The world has become one endless season of flame. There are pockets of drought so severe that the soil cracks open wider than any fault line, swallowing whatever you try to grow. I once watched a single tomato plant claw its way from a crevice, only for it to curl into a husk within hours. Seeds have become treasures. People barter gold and gasoline for a handful of heirloom kernels that might sprout if you're lucky. In the distance, I can hear the mournful whistle of a wind turbine long since frozen by corrosion. A half-collapsed wind farm sits on a ridge, its blades locked in place, a tombstone for renewable promise. Beyond it, the mountains are pocked with landslides, their peaks buried under a blanket of ash that fell from those constant storms. Lightning still dances among the clouds, but it brings no rain, only more static to the radio. Every morning I light the generator and flip the switch on my battered radio. It's the only thing left that connects me to others who still try, to speak hope into the void. Their voices are faint, sometimes lost altogether, but every burst of static and broken melody reminds me, I'm not alone, not yet. In this new world, fractured, violent, and unforgiving, the only thing more precious than water or food is the knowledge that someone out there is still turning their dial, still whispering through the dark, "You're not forgotten." And so I keep the transmitter warm and my own voice ready, because as long as the radio crackles alive, so does the possibility that night will end. The sky hadn't been blue in years. Now it was a permanent bruise, purple-black at dawn, glowing ember-red by dusk. I traced the jagged horizon with my eyes each morning, half expecting it to shift like a living thing, but it never does. Instead, the haze settles thicker over the world, a choking reminder that the air we breathe has changed, irreversibly. Beneath that sky, the land lies fractured. The riverbeds are nothing more than cracked arteries running through what was once fertile plains. I walked the old interstate last week, its yellow lines peeled back like sunburnt skin, edges curled upward in brittle curls. The asphalt is split open, swallowing anything careless enough to drive its length. Grass tries to grow in the margins, but each blade curls brown within hours of sprouting. Drought stole the water, and then came the firestorms, racing across the dried-out fields like predators. Where I grew up, a lake stretched out behind my childhood home. Now it's a salt flat, the sun baking its surface until it glitters like a cracked mirror. I once saw someone pour a ceramic bowl of that lake's water into a fire. The panicked hissing sent steam curling into the sky, as though the flat itself were weeping. In that instant, I understood. Even the land mourns what we've lost. Cities fare no better. What remains of the skyline is a jagged silhouette of collapsed cranes and leaning office blocks. The windows are gone, blown out by storms or shattered by scavengers hunting copper wiring. I crawled through a half-collapsed subway station last month. The tunnels littered with abandoned backpacks, faded photographs, and the skeletons of rats. Somewhere above, a mural of blue waves and a smiling sun stared down, its colors bleached by sun and smoke. I paused beneath it and felt a strange ache, as though the painting remembered the world I couldn't. Governments hold no sway here. The Capitol sits in rubble, its marble pillars stained with soot. I've heard rumors of a council operating out of an old university campus. Professors turned warlords, hoarding seeds and medicine behind armed fences. Farther east, a group calling themselves the Iron Keepers claim dominion over the old steel mills. They patrol the rusted smokestacks in armored vehicles cobbled together from scavenged parts. No one knows if their armor can stop bullets, but it sure scares off anyone without enough lead lining their pockets. In between these fortified enclaves are the drifters, like me. We scavenge for tin cans of fungus stew, batteries for our radios, or the occasional barrel half full of rainwater. When the storms come, acid rain that burns like bullets, there's nowhere safe to hide. You learn to move fast, to hold your breath when the sky opens with that sour hiss, and to scrub your skin raw afterwards just in case. Wildfires still rage through the canyons at random, sometimes sparked by lightning, sometimes by human carelessness. The wind carries embers like vultures, and within minutes a patch of scrubland can become a furnace. Last month, I watched a wall of flame crawl toward my camp. We doused our makeshift tents in what little water we'd salvaged and ran into a dry creek bed, hearts hammering until the firestorm passed like a wounded beast. When I returned, the camp was gone. A circle of blackened earth marked where we'd slept. Food is a currency more valuable than gold. I barter old world cans, spaghetti, peaches, and syrup, for a handful of seed packets. We try to grow food in the rubble, lettuce in broken bathtubs, tomatoes in rusted barrels lined with plastic sheets. Most won't survive the acid dust. Few that do are shriveled and bitter. Still, we cling to the hope that one day we'll taste something fresh again. Night is the worst. Without electricity, the dark has teeth. You think you hear footsteps in the black or the whisper of radios long dead. Some call it madness. I call it instinct. If you sit still too long, the world will swallow you. So I stay near the crackle of my generator, the faint red glow of the dial my only comfort. Yet even here, among the ashes and echoes, small sparks of life persist. A single green shoot pushing through a crack in the concrete. A strayed dog that follows you for miles, refusing to leave. A cracked radio voice calling across the static, promising safe ground or food drops, or simply stay alive. We're so desperate to hear another human voice that we forgive the lies. This is what the world has become. a fractured mosaic of desperation and determination. Every day is a negotiation with fear. Fear of thirst, fire, raiders, or simply the silence that follows when your radio finally dies. And yet, here I stand, telling you what's left. Because if these words reach someone out there, they'll know one thing for certain. We're still breathing, still searching, still fighting the dark. And maybe that's enough. I am the voice you hear crackling through the static. Call me Elena Torres. Before the world burned and drowned, I was an environmental engineer, wiring sensors to monitor water quality and advising coastal cities on flood defenses. Now my expertise is a rusted toolbox and a battered hand-crank radio. Each day, I scour ruined laboratories and half-collapsed libraries for scraps of paper, chemical formulas, engineering schematics, anything I can trade or repurpose to keep my little transmitter alive.
Survival these days is both art and arithmetic. I ration my water with the precision of a chemist, 1 liter per day for drinking, another to scrub the acid dust from my skin when the storms hit. Food comes in dehydrated pouches I stumble upon, in old FEMA caches, or in the handful of wilted greens I coax from salvaged planters beneath the broken skylights of abandoned greenhouses. Each tomato seed I plant in a cracked coffee can feels like a gamble. It might sprout, or it might die under the relentless ash. But without chances, hope withers faster than crops. I keep moving because of the radio. When I first found this battered set, its plastic shell charred, its dials jammed, I thought it was a relic of a world gone dim. Then I heard someone else, a voice so faint I wondered if it was my imagination. "Elena, are you out there?" I tightened the antenna and replied, with trembling fingers. Since that moment, I've carried the radio like a lifeline, repairing its coils in scavenged workshops, scavenging hand-crank parts from old bicycles, anything to keep the signal alive. It's more than a machine. It's proof that I'm not the last. Before the collapse, I lost my partner, Marco, to the first wave of storms. He stayed behind to help a coastal town reinforce its levees. I watched the satellite feeds as the surge collapsed every barrier. His lab flooded, his final transmission a gurgling whisper before the feed went dead. I've spent years chasing fragments of his voice in the static, never finding it. But I keep searching, convinced that if I can broadcast far enough, I'll reach him on the other side. Other survivors call me the beacon. They tune in each evening when the ash settles and the world goes quiet. I share what I know, how to test water with simple strips of paper torn from old lab notebooks, the makeshift solar still I jury-rigged from a car hood and plastic sheeting, the code for our makeshift call sign, Torres, that other wanderers can use to identify friendly broadcasts. Every tip is a promise that someone, somewhere, is listening. And every acknowledgement, "Thanks, Elena. You saved my group last week," swells my chest with a fragile pride. Yet hope can be a double-edged sword. There are nights when the generator sputters and dies, and the silence is so complete, I can hear my own heart thudding in the dark. I think of Marco's laugh, the way he used to hum while fixing a circuit board, and I taste the salt of tears I dare not shed. I remember my parents arguing over dinner, oblivious to the rising oceans, a world away from these ash-choked ruins. Sometimes I feel the weight of every loss, of every collapsed sanctuary I couldn't save. The guilt claws at me, whispering that maybe I should have done more. But morning always comes, blood-red light filtering through the haze, and with it, resolve. I bundle into my patched-up leather jacket, pack a day's ration of water, and set out along the broken highways. I'm looking for parts, people, anything that will keep the beacon burning. I've learned to read the land. The curve of a dried creek bed might conceal a cache of tins. The tilt of a broken billboard could mark a dead zone where no one dares to scavenge. I move quietly, mindful of patrols by the Iron Keepers or the Lanterns, but also ready to share my signal with those brave enough to approach. In rare moments of respite, I record messages on old microcassette tapes, snippets of hope, of scientific advice, even snippets of poetry that Marco once loved. I bury them in canisters in case the radio falls silent, so that someone might unearth them later and know we were here, that we tried. Each tape is a time capsule, a testament that humanity didn't vanish without a fight. So here I am, Elena Torres, survivor, engineer, broadcast voice, and eternal optimist. I've witnessed cities crumble into dust, seen families splinter under starvation, felt the earth shudder with climate's revenge. Yet I stand, microphone in hand, ready to tell the next story, share the next solution, or simply offer a greeting across the void. You are not alone. Stay with me as I keep the night from swallowing us whole. That, more than water, more than food, is what drives me on. Because as long as the signal carries, so does our will to endure. The horizon trembles with heat haze, and I know by instinct that trouble is coming. The air crackles with low-frequency rumbles, sound waves too deep for normal hearing, heralding the next catastrophe. I tighten my grip on the radio's microphone and begin my broadcast, voice low but urgent. The crisis we face now isn't a single calamity but a chain reaction. Drought feeding fire, fire fueling storms, storms eroding defenses we can no longer afford to rebuild. For the last 5 years, rainfall across the continental interior has plummeted by nearly 70%. What little moisture does arrive falls in ferocious, unseasonal downpours that the parched earth can't absorb, turning into flash floods that carve new gullies through what was left of our farmlands. Meanwhile, the sky above broils with temperatures that routinely soar past 50 degrees, 122 degrees, by mid-afternoon, then crash below freezing at night. Diurnal swings so extreme they crack concrete and snap tree trunks like toothpicks. Imagine a heat dome that refuses to lift. High-pressure ridges park themselves over the continent, baking riverbeds into sun-bleached scars. Aquifers we once tapped for irrigation have fallen 60 meters below the levels recorded a decade ago, beyond the reach of most hand pumps. Wells that once gushed now trickle, then choke, then die altogether. I learned early on to carry a simple refractometer, a tool that measures the salinity of water by how much it bends light. If the reading goes above 0.5 pt, parts per thousand, it's too salty for safe consumption. I've watched that dial creep upward each month, and I know the day will come when I won't find a single well with potable water. The grasslands, more tinder than soil, ignite with the merest spark. Wildfires have become megafires, hundreds of thousands of hectares aflame, their flames leaping kilometers at a time. The wind carries embers overhead, dropping them onto the roofs of our shelters like cursed raindrops. Evacuation routes are choked with smoke so thick that headlights cut no farther than 10 meters. Last autumn's firestorm forced me to flee with nothing but the clothes on my back and a canteen that held a quarter cup of water. I learned then that protective gear is not optional. I wrap my face in a damp bandana treated with activated charcoal to filter out soot and acids. I will not make that mistake again. Then come the storms, twisted, violent, and scientifically alarming. Warm air holds more moisture. With each degree Celsius of warming, the atmosphere can carry roughly 7% more water vapor. As the Gulf and Pacific heat up, they fuel supercharged storm systems inland. These are not the gentle rains of old. They are derecho-class winds, over 100 km/h gusts, accompanied by hailstones the size of fists. They shear rooftops off of makeshift shelters and topple the patched-together solar panels we rely on. I chronicle barometric pressure with a salvaged aneroid gauge. When it drops below 970 HPA, I know to batten down everything that can move. My engineering mind craves numbers, so here's one for you. The USDA classified over 40% of once fertile farmland as severely degraded by 2023. Soil organic carbon, the living glue that binds soil particles, has plummeted, turning our topsoil into dust bowls. I've tried growing heirloom seeds in raised beds lined with plastic sheeting and amended with biochar I produce by burning scrap wood in an oxygen-limited kiln. Even so, yield is meager. A handful of bitter greens, a few spindly tomatoes. Every mouthful is a victory, but it feels like dropping pebbles into the Grand Canyon. Fuel is currency, and our reserves are nearly spent. The last pipeline ruptured 2 years ago. The pumping stations went silent, their diesel generators starved. I jury-rigged my own generator to run on waste vegetable oil, collected from ruined restaurants and mobile canteens, but the supply is erratic. When the solar cell arrays on my shack get coated in ash, they lose nearly 80% of their efficiency. I clean them by hand, brushing the panels with a microfiber cloth each dawn, but the ash returns, thick as a blanket, every evening. Solar. Stills built from plastic sheeting and black-painted metal pans that heat moisture and collected on a sloping cover. They yield 0.2 liters per square meter per day, enough for one ration if you can spare the plastic dot canvas sheets spread over. Cold metal at night to capture dew, scraped into containers at dawn. Yields vary based on humidity. The last kit I salvaged managed 50 mil in a good night, hunting down abandoned cisterns and tanks, testing water with either pH strips, I aim for 6.5, 8.5, or the refractometer to keep salinity under control. Wild. Game has fled the fire zones. Rodents burrow deeper and birds migrate further north if they survive at all. My diet is 90% canned lichen stew, harvested from acid-resistant moss banks, and sprouts coaxed from clumps of rescued lentils. Protein is a rare currency. I snare rats in wire mesh traps baited with peanut butter, grill them over. A contained flame to kill pathogens and dip the meat in vinegar solution, 5% acetic acid, to denature surface bacteria. Gasoline is a myth. Propane tanks rusted long ago. Cooking stoves run on charcoal. I produce via slow pyrolysis of driftwood. Refrigeration is non-existent. I keep perishables in an underground root cellar, lined with scrap insulation panels, at 4 to 6 degrees C, just enough to slow bacterial growth. Batteries are scavenged from abandoned EVs, but each deep discharge...
Antibiotics are scarce. I barter iodine tincture and powdered vitamin C, ascorbic acid, for any left in hospital dumps. Wound care relies on silver-impregnated dressings fashioned from old shipboard kits. Tetanus shots are a distant memory. Polar ice melt has thinned Arctic ice cover by over 50% since 2000. Darker ocean water absorbs more solar radiation, warming further. A vicious loop that accelerates all other effects. In the north, permafrost is melting, releasing methane, AI, greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than CO2 over a 100-year period. This spike in atmospheric methane is raising global average temperatures at an unprecedented clip, 0.2 degrees C per decade. Even warming between equator and poles has slowed the jet stream, causing weather patterns to stall. That's why we endure week-long heat waves followed by 3-day deluges. The storm systems simply park over a region. Intensive farming and drought stress have released carbon from soils faster than reforestation can absorb it. The resulting spike in atmospheric CO2, now 420 ppm, fuels the greenhouse effect even further. As the oceans absorb CO2, pH drops and calcium carbonate shells dissolve. Phytoplankton populations collapse, disrupting the marine food web. And consequently, the fish stocks we once relied on use a black metal pan, cover it with transparent plastic at a 30-degree angle, and weight one end with a small rock so condensation runs down into a collection trough. Insulate the bottom with foam or rubble to retain heat. Carry pH strips, aim for neutral 7+1, and a small refractometer. If salinity exceeds 0.5 ppt, you'll need to dilute or find another source. High salinity accelerates dehydration. Slow burn scrap wood in an inverted metal drum with small vent holes. The resulting charcoal, when mixed into soil at 10% volume, boosts water retention by up to 25% stretched dark fabric over cool metal surfaces overnight. Check at first light. Dew can net you 3,100 millimoles in per square meter in humid zones. Line walls with salvaged insulation panels or even folded cardboard. A well-insulated cabin can stay 10 degrees C warmer in winter and 10 degrees C cooler in summer, slashing energy needs. Keep electronics in Faraday cages to protect from solar flares. Coronal. Mass ejections have knocked out weak grids repeatedly. A simple cage can be built from steel mesh and grounded pipes. I broadcast these instructions while the storm gathers strength beyond my radio horizon. Wind gusts already top 80 kilometers H, and I know from the falling barometer that the worst is minutes away. My generator sputters under the strain. I've rationed the diesel to its last 200 millimoles, enough for 5 more minutes of power. After that, the radio goes silent. But I will not abandon the airwaves. I'll switch to hand crank mode, broadcasting on low wattage because every voice matters. If this signal falters, others must follow the blueprints I've left in hidden caches, etched onto stainless steel plates buried beneath the remains of old weather stations. The knowledge must outlive me, because the crisis isn't just here and now. It's on a trajectory. Temperatures will climb, storms will intensify, and resource lines will fray until nothing holds. Yet armed with science, ingenuity, and the will to survive, we can carve out pockets of resilience. We can build micro-ecosystems of life amid the ruin. So listen closely. Gather your tools. Fortify your shelters. Conserve every drop of water. And above all, keep the broadcast alive. Because hope, like energy, cannot be created or destroyed. It must be transmitted, amplified, and shared. And as long as we can hear one another's voices crackling through the dark, we still have a chance. The night the dust storm came was the night everything changed. I'd just finished sending out my evening broadcast, 2 minutes of static-laced science, a rundown of tomorrow's dew harvesting forecast, and a plea for any survivors who knew of water beyond the dead wells. As I tightened the bolts on the antenna mast, the sky overhead rippled like a disturbed pond. A low howl rose on the wind, a sound so deep it felt like the earth itself was flexing underfoot. My hair stood on end. I'd heard the warnings on. The barometer, 945 HPA and falling. Winds already gusting past 100 kilometers an hour. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. At first it was an inky wave advancing from the west, an abyssal wall rolling over the plains. I felt the hairs on my arms prick as the temperature dropped 10 degrees in less than a minute. The generator's hum wavered, and I rushed to refill the fuel tank, clutching my canteen and a handful of pre-restored micro-cassette tapes, my backup broadcasts should the radio die. Then the wind hit. It crashed into the shack like a runaway freight train. The door slammed shut, rattling the walls. I braced against the splintered wood, heart hammering, as a blast of grit and ash tore through every crack and crevice. My damp bandana suffocated me with ash-choked air. I could taste metal on my tongue. I staggered for the generator room, yanking the lever to shut down the engine. The roar of the storm swallowed every other sound. For 60 harrowing minutes, I huddled in my insulated bunker, a shallow trench I'd dug beneath the shack, lined with insulation panels and covered by tarps and debris. Outside, the world convulsed. I felt the ground tremble as walls of abrasive dust flattened everything in their path. The antenna mast snapped halfway up, whining like a wounded creature before it collapsed in a spray of sparks. I held the radio's handset to my chest, fingers numb, willing it to survive the onslaught. When the storm finally passed, the sky was an angry copper, illuminated by distant fires still burning in the lowlands. I crawled out of my trench into a world remade. The surrounding landscape was layered in ash half a meter deep, every surface a uniform gray. The heat had ignited underground gas pockets, and small geysers of flame dotted the fields like wounded beasts. My shack lay in ruin, its solar panels shattered. The radio room collapsed. I thought it was the end. My beacon had fallen, my notes, my tapes, my plans, buried under tons of engineered apocalypse, and for a moment I let despair wash over me. I remembered Marco's final transmission. If the beacon goes silent, find the source. but I had no source left to find. Then I heard it, the faintest drip. Water. My pulse spiked. I crept toward the western wall of rubble, where our cistern once stood. Beneath the crushed metal hatch, I found a narrow channel carved by the storm's ferocious energy. Into that channel trickled water, cool, clear, alive. My hands shook as I scooped it up. It tasted of earth and promise. I sank to my knees, tears burning my eyes. This couldn't be random. Natural springs didn't survive megastorms intact. Someone had protected it. Fueled by adrenaline, I followed the channel downhill, ankle deep in ash, splashing, through shallow rivulets that gathered into a shallow pool beneath a fractured concrete slab. There, emblazoned on the slab in fading white paint, was an arrow pointing east, and the letters Oasis, an unexpected beacon carved before the collapse. My heart thundered. Not a rumor, not a myth. Proof of life beyond my cramped world. I scrambled up the slope indicated by the arrow, stumbling over debris until I reached a camouflaged entrance. A reinforced hatch set into the hillside, half hidden by toppled metal beams and overgrown mesh. I pried it open, muscles trembling, and found a narrow stairwell edged with solar-powered LED strips still glowing green. Below, the stairs curved into darkness. I wasn't prepared for what lay beneath the hill. The hatch opened onto a vaulted chamber carved into bedrock, walls lined with tanks and pipes, and, most miraculous of all, a bubbling pool of water fed by an artesian well. The air here was cool and misty, the only place I'd been since the collapse that didn't taste of ash. Rows of hydroponic bays flanked the pool, their blue-green lights still pulsing, sustaining racks of leafy greens and a dozen mature tomato, vines heavy with fruit. In the center stood a solar-charged water filtration unit, its gauges reading normal on pH and salinity. I stepped forward, awestruck. Someone had built this sanctuary, an entire community's lifeline, shielded from storms powered by forgotten tech growing food underground. My throat clenched. The oasis had been a legend among drifters, a hidden refuge run by scientists who refused to give up on Earth. I'd half believed it was just a comforting fable, a bedtime story for the desperate. But here it was, alive and waiting. Then I heard voices. Soft conversation, clipped tones in a mix of accents. My pulse froze. Had they heard the storm? Was I walking into a trap? I ducked behind a hydroponic bay and peered around its glowing tub. A half-dozen figures in olive green uniforms moved with purpose, unloading crates stamped with EcoGuard initiative. They wore respirators and carried data pads, cataloging stock levels and adjusting climate controls. One figure, a grizzled woman with silver hair streaked by ash, looked up at a camera perched in the corner. "Status?" she asked. A younger man glanced at his tablet. "Generators offline. West entrance collapsed. Minor storm damage, but core systems intact. Production down by 20% until we reroute power. No sign of intruders, just the after effects of the megastorm." My breath caught. They believed no one had breached the hatch. If I revealed myself, would they welcome me as the first outsider in years? Or would they see only a scavenger to be shot on sight? I considered my choices. Take whatever I needed by force, but destroy the only sanctuary I'd ever found. My mind flashed back to Marco's face in grainy video calls, his longing for community when everything felt raw and fractured. He had believed that survival wasn't just about staying alive, it was about rebuilding together. Could I betray that principle now, at the moment of truth? I took a breath, peeling off my ash-stained bandana. I stepped into the light, hands raised in peace. The modeling lights reflected off the metal walls as the soldiers spun, weapons raised. The woman, Commander Aisha Wren, stepped forward, respirator dangling at her neck. Her eyes, sharp behind protective goggles, measured me. I held her gaze. "I'm Elena Torres," I said, voice echoing in the chamber. "Broadcast engineer." I heard the hatch. I followed the water. Silence. The hum of hydroponic pumps filled the void. Then Wren nodded and the younger soldiers lowered their weapons. A wave of relief washed through me, stronger than any storm. I'd endured. Over the next tense minutes, I explained who I was. The voice on the radio, the one who shared survival guides and climate data. They listened, stunned. "We've heard you," Wren said softly. "Your broadcast kept our engineers alive during the South Plains fires. Without your guidance on water testing, we'd have lost half our team." My chest tightened. This hidden community, the Oasis, was real, and they knew me. My heart pounded with a mix of triumph and fear. If this group thrived, they could be the seed of humanity's recovery. But to survive here, I'd have to join them fully, forswear my solitary broadcasts, my wandering life. The weight of that choice settled on me like the ash outside. Wren gestured toward the hydroponic bays. "We have enough food and water for our numbers, but we need to expand. We need the wider world to know we exist so other survivors can seek us out and help us sustain this place. Can you keep broadcasting?" I looked at the pulsing lights, the crowd of hopeful faces behind goggles and masks. I thought of the nights. Alone in my shack, the generator sputtering and dying, the endless static. I pictured those hidden caches of etched plates with my instructions, waiting for someone to find them. I nodded. "I will broadcast, but not just here. I'll link your feed into my network. We'll send coordinates. We'll build a map of sanctuaries, link Oasis to other pockets of life. We'll turn the story from survival to rebuilding." Wren's lips curved in what passed for a smile. "Welcome home, Elena Torres. Let's light up the world again." In that moment, I realized the storm hadn't destroyed me. It led me here. The turning point wasn't the hatch opening or the discovery of water. It was choosing to join forces, to amplify hope instead of hoarding it. As I sat before the repaired transmitter, its coils humming with renewed power, I spoke into the microphone. "This is Torres calling all survivors. The Oasis stands ready. Coordinates to follow. You are not alone. Together, we will outlast the night." Outside, the copper sky was clearing, the winds finally abating. For the first time in years, I felt like dawn might break, not just for me, but for all of us. Together. The first mornings after the storm felt surreal. I woke to the low hum of Oasis's machinery instead of the rasp of my old generator, to the soft glow of LED panels instead of the harsh flare of emergency lamps. Outside the reinforced hatch, the world was still splashed in ash and scorched earth. But here, in the subterranean sanctuary, green shoots climbed trellises and water trickled in a measured cascade from the artesian well. When I broadcast the coordinates of Oasis, I expected a trickle of replies, tentative signals from drifters or lone camps. Instead, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Over the next 3 days, nearly a dozen groups keyed in on our frequency. Small parties of farmers who still remembered how to tend the land. Engineers who'd cobbled solar cells from farm equipment. Teachers and physicians who'd kept clandestine. Community clinics alive. Each group came bearing gifts, spare parts, heirloom seeds, homemade batteries, even a handful of preserved pollen to bolster our biodiversity. By the end of the first week, our underground hallways bustled with newcomers. We converted storage bays into dormitories, installed makeshift shower stalls, and rationed food from the hydroponic bays to accommodate the influx. The initial chaos was tempered by the Eco Guard Initiative's protocols. Each newcomer underwent health screenings, orientation on resource management, and lessons in our cooperative governance. I watched young parents hand their children to our medics for vitamin infusions, engineers calibrate extra grow lights, and educators set up a schoolroom using scavenged textbooks. Yet not all newcomers came in peace. A small band of armed scavengers approached 3 days after the broadcasts began. Men and women hardened by loss, convinced that the Oasis's bounty was theirs for the taking. They set up camp outside the hatch and demanded entry at rifle point. For a tense hour, I relayed instructions over the radio. Do not open the door. Show them the solar still through the hatch window. Offer water, but no fuel. Maintain a calm. Posture. Commander Wren stepped forward, valves and levers at the ready, and diffused the standoff by demonstrating our water filtration's efficiency. Just enough for 4 of their people to refill canteens, no more. They left, grudgingly respectful, their rifles lowered. It was the first test of our hospitality and our resolve to share without surrendering our hard-won security. In the weeks that followed, the Oasis network began to extend like roots beneath the ruined surface. Small satellite outposts sprung up, an automated weather monitoring station built into a derelict factory, a water testing lab cobbled from shipping containers, a seed bank hidden in an old grain silo. Each site relayed data, rainfall patterns, soil pH levels, storm warnings, back to our central frequency. We learned where to plant next, where to build windbreaks, and which upland areas still held natural springs. I found myself awake at odd hours, scrolling through message logs, editing, maps coordinating supply convoys. Zuri, once solitary and exhausted, became the linchpin of a burgeoning network of cooperation. The burden was heavy. Every miscalculated ration, every lapsed security measure could cost lives. Yet the victories were sweeter than any I'd known. The first shipment of harvested lettuce from a windmill-powered greenhouse. The moment I heard children giggling as they ran through an engineered rain shelter in one of our outposts. The first time a visiting agronomist pronounced our soil enrichment strategy viable on a larger scale. I often pause in the hydroponic bay, where rows of plants bask under artificial light, and think of my old life. I remember Marco's laugh, his certainty that science could fix the world if only we tried hard enough. I carry his memory like a talisman, a reminder that loss can fuel perseverance. I feel the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that I helped build this web of life, but that its future depends on every voice joining ours. At times, I lie awake in the new dormitory wing, its walls lined with insulated panels and flickering lanterns, and wrestle with guilt. For months, I broadcast alone, unwilling to risk my sanctuary by revealing its location. Did my silence cost others their lives? Could I have done more sooner? Each regret surfaces in the midnight hours, but by dawn I lay it aside. Regret is a fire that consumes hope. Action is the water that quenches it. My purpose has transformed. I am no longer just Elena Torres, the lone broadcaster. I am a coordinator, a teacher, a custodian of human ingenuity. I've learned that survival means adaptability. When the Kai's generator fails, we switch to solar. When hydroponics falter, we sow cover crops. When raiders demand entry, we negotiate or stand firm. Every setback is a lesson. Every small victory a blueprint for the next challenge. Beyond the hatch, the environment remains perilous. Megastorms still gather in the distance. Dark swirls on the horizon that blot out the sun. Wildfires creep along ridges, their orange tongues a reminder of the fuel still waiting to be ignited. I lead forays to survey storm damage on our field pods, suits wrapped tight, respirators filtering acidic particles. We document soil erosion, prune burnt, foliage, and reinforce our shelters against the next onslaught. Yet nature shows signs of stubborn revival. In one satellite outpost, moss began to recolonize a slag heap, turning its blackened slopes a muted green. In the abandoned grain silo, buried seeds sprouted in spite of salt buildup, their delicate cotyledons pushing through hardened soil. Migratory birds, sparrows and kestrels, occasionally circle overhead, staking out our solar arrays for perches. These small signals of renewal strengthen our resolve. If life can push through concrete and ash, so can we. I'm more patient now. When a hydroponic bay falters, I resist the urge to dismantle it in frustration. I sit with the problem, diagnose the root cause, and call on experts across the network for advice. I've learned to ask for help, a hard lesson for someone who once believed solitude was safety. I've also learned to celebrate the mundane, a successful water test, a new tomato blossom, a child's finger tracing letters in the dust. These moments are the stitches in the tapestry of survival. My voice on the radio has changed, too. It is still tinged with urgency, but also with warmth and humor. I open broadcasts with jokes about my soggy boots or the stubborn leak in the hatch cover. I read poetry between weather reports, share recipes. For algae fritters, invite listeners to submit ideas for community art projects. The frequency has become our town square, a place where we grieve losses, share solutions, and reaffirm our commitment to each other. The fallen ash outside reminds me that our work is never done. We're racing against climate's relentless feedback loops, temperature extremes, feedback-driven storms, soil carbon loss. But we now have a living laboratory, a network of interconnected refugees where we test restoration techniques, cultivate resilient crops, and map safe corridors. Between settlements, we're drafting plans for a mobile response team that can rush aid to communities facing imminent collapse. We're sketching designs for floating greenhouses on the salty flats and modular solar farms that can be towed away before the next storm. In the weeks since Oasis opened its doors, over 40 settlements have connected to our broadcasts. Some are thriving pockets of co-ops. Others are skeletal camps merely clinging to survival. Our map is a patchwork of life and suffering, but each dot represents a chance, a spark that might ignite a wider flame of renewal. Standing at the edge of the hydroponic chamber one evening, I close my eyes and breathe in the humid, nutrient-rich air. Behind me, the lights glow softly on rows of young lettuce and basil. Ahead of me, the hatch opens onto a world still scarred by climate's fury. But I feel, deep in my bones, that this is why we endure. To prove that even in a world fractured by human folly, cooperation, and ingenuity can weave new patterns of possibility. I think of those early nights alone with my radio shouting into the void. This is Torres calling. I would never have imagined back then that my lonely broadcasts would evolve into this living network of sanctuary and research, of hope and community. The journey has taught me that survival is not a solitary endeavor. It is the sum of every shared resource, every lifted voice, every hand extended in trust. The storm may return. The ash may settle thicker, but we have planted seeds in the soil, in our hearts, and in the airwaves that will grow long after we're gone. And as long as even one sprout breaks through the crusted earth, there is reason to keep broadcasting, to keep believing, to keep surviving, and ultimately, to keep rebuilding the world we nearly lost. The hatch door closes behind me with a soft hiss, sealing the humid warmth of the hydroponic chamber from the ash-choked twilight outside. I pause for a moment, letting the gentle trickle of filtered water against steel tanks ground me. Beyond this door lies a world that still burns and drowns and rages against us. But here, in this subterranean enclave, we've carved a fragile green oasis. I cross the chamber, palms brushing the tender leaves of basil and kale, and I think about how far we've come. A year ago, I scavenged through collapsed buildings, radio clutched in trembling hands, begging the static to carry a single spark of connection. Now, those sparks have become a wire mesh of sanctuaries stretching across the wasteland. We share data on rainfall patterns, swap seed varieties, and relay news of new survivors calling in on our frequency. Yet I know that each achievement is provisional. Tomorrow's storms may wash away our antennas, and tomorrow's droughts may parch our roots. Hope is fragile. I'm reminded of that every time a hydroponic pump sputters or a power inverter shorts under the weight of ash. Last month, an acid storm corroded half our solar array overnight. We scrambled to replace panel assemblies with makeshift covers, scavenged wiring, and even improvised a backup wind turbine from the remains of an oil derrick. We restored 90% of our capacity in 3 days, but the 3 we spent in near darkness taught us how little margin for error we possess. Survival here is an unending series of small victories and narrow escapes. Still, each victory counts. This morning, I walked through our newly built rain catchment courtyard. A courtyard, of all things, lined with angled steel panels and diverters that funnel water into holding tanks. For the first time in 2 years, I watched genuine raindrops sparkle on those panels as a light drizzle fell, the air tasting faintly sweet instead of acrid. We collected over 50 liters in an hour, enough to supplement our filtration systems and ease our rationing. As the first genuine rain in memory, a drizzle, not a downpour, fell outside the hatch, we cheered like children. That moment, we weren't just survivors. We were witnesses to renewal. But dawn still dawns on a broken world. After the drizzle passed, a distant rumble reminded us how quickly skies can turn violent. We don rain gear and check our emergency. Seals, knowing that tomorrow could bring acid rain or a squall strong enough to topple our collectors. We've learned to celebrate life's sweetness even as we brace for its assaults. That duality, joy entwined with vigilance, defines us now. I make my way to the control alcove where the radio sits crackling with incoming signals. The log shows 10 new check-ins since last night. A desert caravan with solar-powered desalination. A mountain refuge using geothermal vents for heat. A floating pontoon farm off a salt-scorched coast. Each report carries coordinates, resource requests, and messages of solidarity. I catalog them in our shared map, routing aid convoys and linking outposts. Behind each entry is a human story. A family reunited, a child's first harvest, a teen teaching peers to calibrate water purity sensors. That map, scribbled across monitors and paper charts, is our modern tapestry of hope. It reminds me that we are no longer isolated souls fighting extinction. We are a collective intelligence, a distributed network of resilience. Still, I know that distribution breeds vulnerability. One node falls silent and a whole fringe of survivors goes dark. Each node must uphold its part of the network, or the web unravels. Lately, I found myself thinking about legacy. What will remain when I'm gone? The Oasis chambers will one day falter. The circuitry rust and my voice may wane into silence. But I've begun to record our techniques, etching them onto stainless steel plates and embedding them in sealed caches. Around our outposts, I've trained a group of apprentice engineers, each responsible for stewarding a portion of our system. One for water, one for power, one for agriculture, one for communications. They are young, too young perhaps, but they carry the spark of curiosity that Marco and I once shared. My greatest fear now isn't death, it's complacency. A single failure of coordination could starve one of our outposts or leave a community cut off. So I broadcast warnings as often as I share successes. Storm incoming, secure your arrays. Test your harvests, report any fungus or pest outbreaks. Check your battery cycles, reserve fuel for emergencies. I pepper my broadcasts with practical advice, bits of poetry, and reminders that we are not alone. I close each session with the same line. Stay alive, stay human. Tonight, as I prepare my final message for the day, I'm aware that this routine might be my last chance to speak to the scattered survivors before another tempest breaks. I lean into the microphone, voice steady but soft. This is Taurus, calling all coordinates. Rain may fall tomorrow or it may burn. Our stations along the salt flats report a fresh fissure feeding a new spring. If you're tracking east of Meridian Ridge, you'll find water that needs testing. Send samples, build filters, and hold fast. We're more than data points. We're proof that life endures. In the silence between storms, listen for each other's voices. There's strength in our numbers, resilience in our shared knowledge. Stay alive, stay human. I let the microphone rest, the static humming in the empty. Akove. I imagine a listener tuning in, maybe someone who's almost given up, catching those words and finding enough reason to rise at dawn, to check their panels, to plant one more seed. That, I realize, is my legacy. A whisper in the wind that carries the promise of morning. I step out into the airlock, feeling the chill of the ash-laden twilight brush my face. I pause and look back at the softly glowing hatch, the green light of renewal that pulses like a heartbeat against the dark. Behind me stands a community that has stumbled, bled, and built anew. Ahead of me stretches a world still scarred, still unforgiving. But now, threaded with pockets of life we lit together, I don't know what tomorrow holds. Perhaps the Oasis network will expand until a new civilization weaves itself across the ruins. Perhaps another megastorm will sweep away our progress and remind us how tenuous our footing is. But for tonight I have this. Enough water for one more drink, enough light for one more broadcast, enough hope for one more dawn. Stay alive, stay human. That is my final message, and our shared vow, as the night once again refuses to end.